Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast.
Tonight, I need you by my side. Hold on to me and keep me in the light. And when the shadows get long and the whippoorwill song is so loud that it hurts, I need to be with you tonight so I can stay on the bright side of the earth.
What's happening, all my woods people? We're back in Texas, and it's like freezing to everybody here, and we're like, I'm wearing a t-shirt right now. It's like, this is the island in the sun.
Yeah.
It's weird how quickly you can acclimate.
It is,
you know?
Especially when you are, when you're thrown to the like drastic end of the other direction.
Yeah.
Like, it's freezing cold, but then you get to something that's just freezing cold, and it's not too bad.
Yeah. Everybody around here is like, it's freezing cold. It's like 39, and I'm like, dude, it's warm here. Like, it's crazy how warm 39 feels here. Mm-hmm. Where like, if I hadn't have been in the weather I've been in, I probably would be pretty cold.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the wind.
Yeah,
like even whenever it was like 55 and windy, it's still really cold, and it's like you're, wind chill, which is something that we like to talk about a lot because we have friends who really put a lot of emphasis on wind chill.
They like to talk about how they deer hunted in -40, and it's like, the wind chill, you can't just call the temperature what the wind chill is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you have to say feels like -40. You know what I mean? You can't just do that. We don't go around in Texas in the summer going, well, it feels like 117 here, so I'm going to say it's 117 here today. You know, like it's 104. Not 117, you know.
Just let it be what it is, because the 104 is bad enough.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
0 degrees is bad enough where we were whenever we were hunting.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be back where it's a touch warmer, to tell you the truth. I'm ready to go back to where it's a touch colder again, though, already.
Oh, my goodness, especially after that card pull, man.
Yeah.
We've got basically today what we're doing is talking about Kansas and our trip there for, I guess you would call it the Rut-cation.
Is it bad that I don't like that term?
Yeah, I kind of don't either. It's just, I don't know what else to call it when you go for like 6 days during the rut. I probably should. Well, let's just figure out a new term to call that.
Yeah, if you got ideas, send them our way.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. They cannot use the word grind in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
No. Yeah, so it was a fun week. I feel like I learned a lot, and I got a full experience. I felt like this time around, and I know you had mentioned several times that like it just feels like that, you know, we start to figure it out on day 4 or 5 or whatever, and technically that's true. You know, like we start to really feel like if I could just sit there 3-4 more sits, like I'm for sure going to kill a buck. But when we look back, and we kind of talked about this a second ago. We look back at like the hunts we've done this year, like first or second days have been pretty good for us, really. Mm-hmm. So like it's not that we're not figuring it out necessarily. It's just that whatever happens in that circumstance. Like for instance, the elk. Most of you have probably watched the elk video. Like the first day, we were in the money. We were in the chips, and you know what happened there. And then. For instance, let's see, today or this trip that we're talking about, first day we almost shot a big deer. Like it would have happened without one doe seeing us. Does just mess things up sometimes, man.
They do. I never got caught this trip by a buck once until the last morning, and it was a deer like I didn't. Like, I'd already said, okay, I need to move to be able to look at this other buck. I don't care if this guy sees me over here. But for the most part, does are like 5 times as wary, especially this time of year. Because they're always like, let me eat a little bit. Oh, what was that? Oh, like give you the whole, like, my head's down. Oh, it's up. You know, that whole thing, man.
Yeah.
They are, they just, and you can't see them as good. And that was the big problem on that big deer you're talking about, because we were, like, really positioning him by where his antlers were, because they were like white, and we could see him because of his antlers. Well, we couldn't see the doe because she didn't have no antlers.
Yeah.
We didn't know if her head was up, down, or whatever. She was kind of out of sight, out of mind. And I think that's kind of what messed us up.
Yeah. The hindsight, man, we have so many ways we can fix what we did wrong when we look at things in hindsight. But essentially what happened was that morning was we decided to we just last second decided we were going to sit in the truck, and we decided we were going to sit in the truck because when we pulled the truck up to park and walk in, there were like deer all around us.
That's right.
We had bucks around us. And so we decided, well, let's just sit here and see what happens. And so after a little while, we moved over and we were glassing this little draw or whatever, and we see deer fest kind of going on or whatever. And essentially we see a big 10 that's like probably in that like 155 range, just to give you a picture mentally. Big 10, wide antlers, heavy, and he's like locked down with a doe, and there's several other does and a little buck. And this little buck just stands off at like 50 yards from the doe and the buck that are kind of in lockdown. And they're in these sunflowers, and he keeps going back up and like bristling up to this buck and then coming back down to her or whatever. So finally, I mean, it's a warm day and everybody beds down pretty early. And so we sit around. We don't get any hurry. We did the best. I mean, we made the best plans that we could, I feel like. We didn't want to get in a hurry. We wanted to make sure that everything was like triangulated via the map and like different deals, so we knew exactly where this buck was when we got back around to the other side where we were going to. I mean, he was only a few hundred yards off the road, like 350 yards off the road. And so we were like, we want to make sure we're right on with this. And so, I don't know, it took a while for us to actually make a move. We sat there and watched that area, make sure nobody did anything or got up. And so I don't know, like, was it like 10 o'clock maybe that we headed around?
I think
there?
it was. I think, it's right, very close to that.
And then we headed over. We get out, and we're like, okay, we're not going to try to make this an all-day thing. We're going to bust up in there. We've got some elevation to help us out, some sunflowers and that kind of thing. We're going to bust up in there, get to like 70 yards. We're going to snort wheeze, hold the decoy up, and he's going to bristle up and come right at us. It's going to be, I mean, like we knew it was going to work.
And we'd seen him like super aggressive towards the little buck. So we knew that like he was in that mood.
Yeah. So we thought, well, it's going to happen. Like it's, I mean, there's almost no question in our minds that like if he stands up at 70 yards and sees a decoy, he's going to walk to us. And at that point, he needs to close about 40 yards to give us a real good shot. And so it was going to happen. We get over there about probably 120, 110 yards maybe, and all of a sudden you see his antlers. He's standing up. We're like, dadgummit. This happened to us last year where like we would be closing in on a buck and he would stand up just for no reason, and just look around, and then we'd be like, okay, well, we got to sit here for 15 minutes to see if he goes back to bedding down. So anyway, he stands up, and we can see him kind of pacing a little bit up and down, and like his antlers will kind of disappear for a little bit, and never really could see his head anyway. So every time we would kind of lose his antlers, we would just like try to grab some ground, and we'd get to like 90 yards, and all of a sudden I look over kind of just a little bit to the left, and a doe is busting out of there, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? And so Casey and I don't know if I saw it or whatever, but we saw it, and we're watching it head to our left, to our downwind, and then all of a sudden I see the buck, and I'm like, dude, buck, he's behind her, whatever. And so we look and we see him, he's running behind her, and Casey hits him because they're heading to our wind, so he hits him with a snort wheeze.
I've got the decoy up at this point.
Yes, yeah, and bow mounted and everything. Holding it up, hits him with a snort wheeze, and that dude immediately just tenses up, bristles up, and like maybe takes like a step or two, and then that doe is she's still running. She takes off running, and he sees her, and I mean it was like you could tell at that point, especially that like it was going to happen if that doe hadn't have seen us. What
is like, I guess the worst part of that whole deal is he's much further away there than what he was when we could see him pacing back and forth with his by his antlers. He's like probably 120 yards. at that point in time,
Yep.
and he still came to a snort wheeze. So
Yeah.
technically, if we would have just snort wheezed him whenever he's at 90,
Yeah, when he first stood up, or whenever we got to where we were at, essentially. I don't know. It's just when you're hunting deer from the ground, man, there are so many things that like you look back on and you're like, man, I wish I'd have done this or I'd done that. And I told KC when we were hanging out during the midday one day, I was like, man, I feel like in 7 or 8 years, I'm going to look up and there's going to be some instance where I go, you know what? That's happened 5 times to me in the last 7 or 8 years. And I'm going to learn something kind of like groundbreaking. And it may not even be like something that happens to me, but it's something that like in, say, 3 years, I start trying something new that's pretty bold. And then I figure out that like, oh, well, I'll be able to pull this off on 3 deer in the next 4 years. Like, this is something that I never would have done 3 years ago or, 7 years ago, whatever. And so, like, I feel like that's going to happen to me. And I think that I say that because when I'm on the ground, I'm super conservative about being seen just because I know how well they see and I know how little tolerance a buck has for it. But I just kind of wonder if you're in the heart of the rut, if a deer is just raged up, like, I wonder what you can get away with. And I'm never willing to really test it because we've only had so many, encounters with decent bucks on the ground.
I mean, we're going in no chronological order on this thing, so let's jump way ahead to another encounter you had on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's kind of along that line. Like, this deer saw you, and then what?
Well, so this may be the reason I said this to you.
Yeah.
We started this conversation, but like, so this was a crazy evening, man. We've got some private pieces up there. We've been working hard on our permissions. My dad has a lease up there that he allows me to go on, and I haven't been on it this year. I was on it twice last year at all the days we hunted. It's something that I don't like, that I want to do for sure, but at the same time, like, I don't intend to step on anybody's toes, and I'm kind of low man on the totem pole, and I am fine shooting 135-inch 8-point. You know what I mean? Like, that is fun to me, and that's a big deer. And so as long as we had those deer to hunt on other private pieces or on public, I'm going to go after it. You know what I mean? So, and not worry about stepping on anybody's toes or shooting some deer that somebody didn't want shot on the lease or whatever. So I don't hunt over there a lot, but I plan on going out there. And this particular evening, which was the last evening that we hunted, and there was a guy that's kind of pulling things together last minute out there that's on the lease, and he was out there. And so I asked him, hey, have you been over to my stand? I'm thinking about hunting this evening. And he said I was fixing to go corn it. And so I was like, I asked him, I said, hey, do you mind holding off of it just so I can hunt it this evening? And I never heard back from him. So I guess he ran out of service or something. But anyway, he since I never heard from him, like 45 minutes later, I'm like, okay, I got to do something. So I'm thinking I'm going to head to Publ. You and I decided to split up and hunt separately at this point.
Yeah, we're trying to maximize our time because we only have like a day and a half left.
Yeah, 2 hunts essentially. So we're trying to maximize time. We split up. I decide I'm going to go to Publ. You're going to go hunt this a couple big deer on another permission piece that we have picked up or that we had. And so I kind of, what I'm getting to with the story is I get kind of in a roundabout way, I get kicked off of my spot on the private place, then I go to Publ, and this is a place that we had hunted earlier in the trip, and the tree that we hunted out of, we took stands in and hunted out of our own stands or whatever, but there's a stand in the tree, and so we're like, okay. I'm like, when I'm going out there by myself, I take a stand in, I'm just going to hop in the tree. It's in a good spot and just hunt out of that stand.
Yeah. Putting a stand in a tree you can't just claim a spot for the season and not be there. It's not how it works on public land.
Yeah. So, I mean, granted, I could have taken my own stand in and hung everything in my own steps, but I think most people can see the rationality of just hopping up in a tree real easily.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The silliness of putting a stand right next to another stand.
Yeah, yeah, that too on the other end. So anyway, I go in there, I set up, I got my camera and stuff set up and everything, and I'm sitting there for like an hour and a half. And at 4:20, I turn around to pee, and as soon as I get done, I'm looking kind of in a different direction, and I see a dude coming from like a few hundred yards away, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So he's walking right to me, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't want him asking questions, so I pull my camera arm down, put everything in my backpack, but I still got everything hung up, and I'm hoping that like when he sees me at like, 200 yards or 150 yards, that he just like stops, sees me, turns around and leaves, and I don't know if he knows a whole lot of, like, I don't know what he was thinking. He was a nice guy, but he walks all the way into me and basically kicks me out of his stand. Like, and I don't know the rules. I'm pretty sure you can leave a stand up all year in Kansas on public, but I don't know the rules as far as like that's your stand to hunt. You know what I mean? Like that's you. What if I had hung my stand in that tree? Like, does he still have a right to sit right beside me? I guess he does, but that's weird. That's not very I don't know. That's not very much couth as far as public land goes.
Well, I think it'd be different too if you learned of a spot because the stand was there.
Yeah.
Like if you're driving around or scouting, you look and say, oh, there's a tree stand in that tree. Oh, this looks like a good hunting spot. Uh-huh. But this is a place that we know is a good hunting spot.
Yeah, he told me how did you know about the spot? And I said, I've been hunting a few years.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's like, come on, guy.
I mean,
but whatever,
anyway.
To each his own.
Yeah, sure. So anyway, he kind of kicks me out, but he's real nice. And so I leave. And at this point, shooting light ends at like 6:05-ish, and it's 4:45 when I start walking out. I mean, I get to my truck and start map scouting at 5, and I'm like, what do I do? Mm-hmm. Well, you had obtained a permission pretty close to there a few nights before, and we had seen it, and it was actually one of the only places that corn was still standing in the area. And so we were like, man, that could be good. A bunch of deer bedding in there or whatever, We never stepped foot on it just because we didn't have a whole lot of faith in it, and the fact that a lot of road frontage, and could be easily seen across, and except for that it's standing corn. So anyway, I was like, I'm just going to go down here, and at this point, I'm just scouting this place. I'm just going to see what it looks like. Maybe I'll learn something that we can put into action next year. So I go down there, I get all my stuff out, and it's after 5. So I've got like an hour until legal shooting is over. I got 30 minutes until sunset, and grab my stuff. I walk out, and in this cornfield, there's a couple of little draws that are, I don't know, 100 yards long or so, that have some cottonwoods in them and this like tumbleweed kind of brush stuff. It's like, oversized grass, essentially. It's good stuff, as far as cover goes and everything for deer and for people. And so I walk in, and I'm just walking through this little belt of cottonwoods, we'll call it, and I'm looking for scrapes and looking for tracks, and start seeing a little bit here and there, and I get about halfway down this thing, and I look up. And by the way, the corn and everything in there, was corn and milo, was cut.
So the corn got cut like in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I see a few tracks. I see a branch. It looks like a scrape branch, but I didn't go over to it close enough to see if there was a scrape underneath it. And just kind of milling around, and I look up, and like 120 yards away is a shooter buck on the edge of the cut corn next to a pretty good thick line of like sunflowers on the back side of this field. And there's really no trees that we could hunt over there or hang in necessarily, but there's a good buck. He doesn't have a clue I'm there. I'm like, oh, dang, come slip into the grass, the tumbleweed grass, stuff or whatever. And so like I get kind of set up on the end of this thing, and get like my cameras out and stuff. I got my GoPro, my stabilizer, and I got my rangefinder out and my calls, and I hit him with grunts. And he doesn't act like he hears them at all. I think one time he turned, and I was grunting and spitting, snoring, wheezes, and everything I could do, besides rattling, because I didn't have my horns with me, because I left those in the tree with old dude in the public land, And so he doesn't act like he hears me but one time, and then next thing I know, I see a doe come out ahead of him out of the sunflowers. And I'm like, oh, that's why it doesn't care, whatever. So anyway, I'm thinking, okay, well, if I can slip back down about 10 yards and get into this brush, I can kind of, this grass is thick enough that like you have to get kind of on one side or the other to shoot over the top of it if you're going to shoot from the ground. And so I'm thinking I might be able to get by this tree over here, get me a shot if they like work out of the edge, because this cottonwood belt is like 70 yards to the edge probably. So like if they work out to like another 30 or 40 yards, like they're going to be starting to get in range of me. So I'm like, I'll need to get over there another 10 yards to get to where I can see them. So I head over there and I get almost with my spot, and I left my backpack over there or whatever, and the buck starts just like randomly leaves the doe and starts coming over to my cottonwood line. And he's coming like to my left down the cottonwood line. He's going to end up hitting it about 40 yards from where I'm sitting. And so I'm like, dadgummit, where's my rangefinder? I don't have it. I left it in my backpack. So it's like a little small draw, on the back side of this thing. So I hop out of the grass, I run down there, I grab my rangefinder, which is like 10 yards away, and I run back. And I should see this deer. And he was getting it across that field, but I don't see him anywhere. I start looking for the doe. I don't see her anywhere. I'm like, did I spook him? Like, what happened? So I sit there glassing for like 5 minutes looking for these deer. I mean, they were 100 yards from me. How do I not see them? Look down, there's like 3 does that come out down the way from me. And I'm just like, man, what in the world? So I sit there for like 10 minutes total, just looking around, and the doe pops back out. And I'm like, well, I guess I didn't spook them, because she would be gone. No doubt if I spooked them. Maybe I spooked the buck and she didn't see it or something. I don't know what happened. So I'm just sitting there, and another 5 minutes goes by probably, and I just get this intuition. And I'm set up on the backside of this cottonwood line so that I can get a shot to her way if the buck comes back out and starts chasing her around. And so I just get this intuition. I turn around, and this big 10 point that's probably like mid 140s 10 is like on a fast walk at me from like 70 or 80 yards out in the cut milo towards the road, back towards my truck. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I put my binos up. I just had them in my hands, I think. Just put them up real quick, and he looked enormous. He was just like massive, man. And he starts running at me. So I'm like freaking out. And I'm trying to like get turned around and move like 6 feet back so I can get a shot out of that grass on the backside of me now. So I'm just like jockeying all over this little tiny thin strip of tumbleweed looking grass. And so I have to pull my bow up out of this grass stuff. It knocks my arrow off the quiver. And your boy Brian was telling me yesterday that if he's like, man, if I could just make people understand they need to shoot a whisker biscuit. And I was like, I shot one for 10 years and now I got rid of it and this is happening to me. Anyway, so it comes off. I have to like knock it in there. This deer's getting close by this point. I move up like 6 feet, and right at the end as I'm getting set in my little spot, he sees me. And I'm like, dadgummit, he's at, probably 50 yards at this point. Maybe he's inside of 50 yards. And I'm like, man, I messed this up. And he looks at me like all alert for a second, and then he just drops his head and dogs down to me. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. He thinks I'm a doe. And so at this point, he's getting close. He's like in bow range pretty much, coming at me. So I'm like, okay, I got to draw. And if you watch the oldest buck ever video, which is the Frankenstein saga from last year, I laid on my back and drew on my back and then sat up and shot. Well, in this case, I'm on my knees, so there ain't no laying on my back. I'm not a, Oriental Japanese gymnast, or whatever. They, those type of people. I can't just like do all these weird back bends and stuff. So I have to like from my knees, like lean over, crouch, like just bend over and try to draw my bow. Like almost like you would see an exaggerated recurve shooter shoot, but like a way over because I'm trying to stay below the grass. And I do that, which is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life to get the bow back. And I thought I wasn't going to get it back, and I just like everything inside of me. I just pulled out everything I had, and I get it drawn. And at that point, he kind of sees me, and so I'm like, that's the last straw for sure. So I pop up. I just fully extend on my knees, pull up and anchor and shoot for 32, and my arrow hits a milo stalk right in front of him, which means it was low for sure. It wasn't like it was going to hit him and it hit the milo stalk. And so he runs off. I glassed him for a while. I'm 99% sure I didn't hit him. But I was just thinking it might have skipped and went up and hit him, and it didn't. No blood, nothing. He watched him for a while. He takes off and kind of leaves, and I was so sad. And so I go over there and get my arrow right before dark, and it's at 45 yards from the tree that was behind me is where it stopped. And so I'm like, man, I guess it just hit that milo stalk, and it pretty much stopped right there. And I guess it shot down a line of milo stalks. And so my assumptions are that he was 40-ish, and I guessed him for 32. I'm shooting very heavy arrows and that kind of thing. So like pin gaps a little bit more dramatic. And then B, after drawing, as hard as that draw was, I feel like my bow hand was probably really weak, and I was shaking anyway because this buck is barreling down on me, and I think that I probably just completely let my bow hand fall, in my follow through, and probably just ended up shooting low in general. And so you combine that with like an 8-yard difference at a distance, a pretty good distance, like arrow just misses low. And so I was dead on left and right. I mean, it was going to bury just right in front of the front shoulder, but it didn't. So I guess what you're coming back to what you were talking about there is that whole like get seen and it's over. And I think where I was at, it was dark enough in those kind of in the cottonwoods and the grass and stuff there that he didn't know what was going on. Not to mention he's like at the height of rut, like anxiety or whatever you want to call it. And who knows, maybe when I drew, he would have still thought I was a doe, but he had definitely gained some ground between the last time he saw me and there, probably almost 20 yards, I feel like. So anyway, just sad story. First time I missed a deer in a long time, but I have given myself a pretty good pass because, off your knees from the ground, considering all the circumstance and everything, man. No time to range, and I've been practicing my ranging in the yard a lot, just visually, and I've done really well this summer. So
yeah, but it's a lot harder when the deer are a lot bigger and you're in a pretty open field.
It is, man.
That's when it gets tough. Like for me, it's pretty easy to range an oak tree in the woods because I have a pretty good, visual reference for things. But you get out there, in the middle of an ag field and the deer are twice the size of what you're used to. Like,
yeah.
Who knows, man? You did good to get close with the 32, I think,
Well, also, man, I just, I don't think I made a great shot. I went back and watched the GoPro footage real briefly. And, it's hard because my hand is like taking up a lot of the screen, the frame. But it definitely looks like I pretty much anchored and shot within like a second. I mean,
it seems like so long whenever
it
you
does,
do it.
dude. I was actually talking to our buddy Sam Hogan last night, and I was like, man, I can remember pulling up, thinking 32 is the yardage, and like then I can remember like the pins shaking like out of control, and I was like, okay, I got to settle this. So I settle, and I can remember settling, and then I can remember pulling the trigger when I got it when I felt good and solid. And all that happens within a second. Like all that mental, goings on happens so quick. And I'll tell you this, man, it's just different than hunting out of a tree stand. It's different than shooting deer out of a tree stand. Like even when a deer surprises you out of a tree stand, I think you have an advantage.
Sure.
It was so surprised. It just happened so quick, dude. Everything, not just the shot, but like the whole circumstance. I went from watching does and wondering where in the heck this buck went to now he's behind me. He's almost on my wind too. That's another thing that I was worried about. Like I would have just let him come to point blank, except for that he was going to catch my wind and may have been at 40 yards and no dice at that point. So, I tried to move up and give myself an opportunity to shoot him, and he saw me. So, just crazy, man. But yeah, I don't know. Like, since it's only one circumstance so far, like it's going to take another couple of times of me like moving around in the grass and a buck charging in at me thinking I'm a doe to actually convince me that I can get away with a lot of movement. You know what I mean? Like it's an outlier as far as I'm concerned right now. So we're just going to have to learn more, you know.
It's nothing like trying out something really risky to see if it works.
Yeah,
it's
where
pretty,
like you're playing with like hundreds of dollars of tags and stuff. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
And
Time.
a really great buck. You know,
Yeah.
one thing if you could mess around with it on some 80 inches around the house, but deer around here don't act like that, so you can pretty much just guarantee you shouldn't move around here. So or hunt from the ground for what that's worth.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. So it was definitely a difficult thing, but jumping around to kind of other stories, I guess we had it got real cold on us, and we had a couple of kind of lackluster days. But you had some when we split up, you had like some pretty neat encounters without me.
I did.
Maybe I'm
man.
bad luck or
on one of
something.
my permission places that I'd got a while back. It's a place that we have gone, and we knew we were going to hunt there some this year. So as quick as we could, which wasn't quick enough, we went and got some corn and put that out over there, which is not a very public land thing to do because this is private land, so it's okay to do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a not cool thing to do nowadays, but honestly, like it still for me is not the coolest to just sit in a tree stand, look at a corn pile 20 yards away, and wait on a deer to walk to it. That's not that much fun. If you enjoy it, do it. But for me, it was a way to concentrate does, particularly, to get bucks to come around. And it worked like to a T.
Yeah.
Right? Like it worked. And honestly, we only had it out for like 3 days, right? Something like that. We
Maybe
put it out
not even.
Put it out on Sunday, I think.
Okay. So about 3 days.
Yeah, so about 3 days, and if we'd have put it out, if I got it out on Thursday when I got there, which was kind of one of the things I was planning on trying to do, and it didn't happen. Oh man! But anyways, the idea was that these deer are living around a cut cornfield in a block of timber. So there is corn there already. It's not like it's something that they're like, oh, I've never seen these kernels before. What is this gold stuff, right? They're out there eating it in the field at night.
But we were talking about the food plot versus baiting advocates and stuff, and it's like I've heard this point made before, and it makes so much sense to me. But it's like if you were an Indian and you had a cornfield and you realize that deer like to eat out of that cornfield after they're eating your corn out of your field or whatever, and you wanted to shoot one with your bow. Would it not make sense to just take that corn and pile it up somewhere so that they have ease to eat it and shoot you a deer? And there's a reason that game departments make bag limits. Because if you shoot more than your bag limit, then it could hurt the deer population, right?
Yeah.
But if you shoot your bag limit, then according to their statistics and their information, we should be okay, right? We should be able to regenerate the population.
So use your legal methods to make that happen.
Sure,
and the thing is, on those private pieces that we have permission on, we aren't going to go up there and put a food plot in.
No.
For multiple reasons.
Yeah.
But most of all,
money,
time and expense, So what's the most effective way to still be able to concentrate deer? It's a corn. It's corn. So put out some corn. Anyways, put it in an area that we already know is like a social hub for deer. From trail camera experience and just walking in there, there are licking branches everywhere and scrapes, quite a few of those around as well. So on that really, really cold front day, you and I did some driving and surviving in the morning, and then in the afternoon we decided to go hang in this big center tree. There's one tree in the ag field that you can go and observe from, and it kind of backs up to some CRP or something. And we decided to go hang in that. It's real windy. It's honestly, looking back, that day was the exception and not the norm. I think we didn't take into consideration how that hunt went with the wind. You know what I'm saying? It was by that point in time, it had warmed up to like a balmy 28, and the wind was down to like 24 as opposed to 30 like it was in the morning. So still very cold and windy. We still saw a few deer from there, but not a bunch. And it was almost like a whatever the opposite of fool's gold is. Like it was like the place was better than what we saw that hunt, but we let that hunt affect our mentality about the property. You know what I'm saying?
I've been trying to work in Fool's Gold into this.
Have you? What
podcast.
is what on? How did I?
There's Fool's
have
Gold
some
sitting
right
right
here.
here next to me.
Oh my goodness, Mr. Pyrite himself. So, anyways, we set up in that cottonwood and didn't see a lot, but we did see one big deer that night. And I say not a lot. We saw a decent amount of deer, but just not. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, you know. So we did see one big deer in a wood lot that was on the property, and he was in and out of it chasing a doe around. So from there, it was like, okay, let's try to make a move on that buck. And that's why I ended up going and setting up where I did and had an encounter with him the next evening. Was it the next evening?
Yeah, because that next morning we went to Publ and decided that we would, because the moon was bright when we were there. And it just seemed like there was no way you were going to get into that wood lot without busting deer out of the cornfield. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the
that's
wheat,
right.
too, or whatever, wherever they might have been, which we noticed they were definitely in the corn a lot.
Yeah, and the only access to this place is through the cornfield, pretty much. You have a little bit of, like, screening from just some natural tall grass here and there, but you're still going to get cinched real hard. So we went to Publ that morning and then split up for that evening, and long story short, had this giant buck come in on me. And, I mean, giant for me, you know, whatever. Some people might not think so. But he's like an 8 that's going to break 140. You know, like he's big.
Yep.
And came and stood on top of that pile of corn and ate for like 2 minutes. And never again. So I've been trying to be a little bit of a purist, I think, about the whole thing. And, like, really being like, okay, I'm going to put this corn pile out, but I'm not really going to hunt it. I'm just going to hunt the deer that are around it, scent checking it and that kind of thing. No, this buck didn't come in and scent check it. He just walked straight in from upwind and just ate corn because he's the boss, and that's what he does. And he's there at 50 yards, which earlier in the season, like in elk season and stuff, was well within my effective range. I felt really good at 50 yards. But that day, it's very windy. He's already just a little edgy, I think, just because of the time of year it is. He's kind of popping his head up, looking around, sniffing and stuff. And, like, the amount of times I've shot my bow in the last 3 weeks is, like, embarrassing because we've been so busy. Like, you don't get to practice when you're hunting every day, pretty much, or working if you're not hunting, or spend time. You know, like, my wife does not like it when I come home and spend an hour outside shooting my bow when I've been gone for 6 days on a trip filming you in Iowa. You know, it's just not really how it works. So, that's just definitely not in my effective range. So, didn't take that shot. I didn't even consider it really. Partially because I thought I was going to get another shot at it. I thought what he was going to do is work his way out in the cornfield and walk right down this tree line that I've got right in front of me. And he didn't. Well, he went where a place I couldn't see him, kind of back in the timber. And then I see 2 does pop out in the cornfield, and he pops out right behind them. I'm thinking, oh, this is going to work perfect because those does have been working up and down the tree line in the shade, eating corn. Like, that's the pattern. That's what they're doing. Yes. And this time of year, he's going to be with them. Well, he comes out, messes around with them a little bit, and then he just, like, puts his head up and just walks directly away from me. Like he knew there was another doe a half mile away that he needed to go see. What is happening? So I kind of frantically get out my grunt call and start hitting with a couple grunts. All the does are looking at me, and he don't care. And so I hit another real hard grunt, and he maybe kind of like looks or something. And then he puts his head back the other direction, keeps walking out, snort wheeze, and nothing. He just goes. He just was on a beat. We had this conversation. Is it beeline or V-line?
Beeline.
Beeline. Because it's the direction a bee travels straight. Is that right?
Yeah, you looked it up.
Okay.
You looked up that one
So
time.
he's on a beeline.
Yep.
Because bees fly a straight line back to the hive.
Yep.
He's on a beeline to this other piece of property, and nothing you can do about it. and it was like my heart sank because it's like this was going exactly how I could have envisioned it. This is happening at 4:45.
Right.
It's still like pretty early in the day. Oh,
Yeah.
and nope, he didn't want to play. He just went the other direction, and those does from there worked their way into me and spent at least an hour at 18 to 35 yards from me for an hour long.
Goodness.
If he'd have stuck with those does, there's no question.
Yeah.
I would have had a shot.
Yeah.
And he just didn't do it.
It makes me cry for you, man, because you've had a rough go of it up there. And it's funny because people, and us as well, we're suckers for like all the big buck states and going and hunting and stuff like that. And granted, there's fun things that happen for sure. And you're after big bucks and stuff. But like Iowa wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, And I think there's a lot of factors that we already discussed that made that way. But, Kansas, like people talk about Kansas all the time. Well, man, it really just boils down to like what property you have. Are you on one of the major river drainages that go to the Mississippi in your state? Well, you're probably going to have pretty good deer action on your property. But if you're a mile from there in the upland with no grass over a foot tall, like you might struggle to see deer, So it's definitely difficult. And I know that part of the sadness that I felt for you happened in the next morning as well, because you had another big buck do something similar.
So something I'm learning about myself is that when I see deer through binoculars at distance, they're always bigger than what I think they are. The big buck that we talked about pursuing on the ground earlier in this trip, I saw him through the binoculars at, 800 yards, and was questioning if he's a shooter or not. Ends up he's a 280-pound, 155, right? So just a little perspective. So remember that big cottonwood we were talking about? The next morning I see a buck pop out at the base of that tree that would have been shot right where he stood if I set up over there, but that doesn't really matter.
Which we were a couple of nights before.
Yeah, we were a couple nights before. Anyways, I see him step out. It's about 400 yards away. I put my binos up, and I can tell he's a decent buck, and he doesn't really look like a shooter, but I said, you know what, I'm going to see if I can at least get a better look at him. And it's dead calm at this point in time this morning. It's weird how it can go from 25-mile-an-hour winds to dead calm all in one evening. But this is the morning, and so I hit some, I guess, kind of medium-tone grunts, nothing real loud, and he heard them. Looked my way, and then he starts trotting across the field. And that's something that'll always make your heart flutter a little bit when a deer starts trotting anything your direction, anything in your 180 degrees. If he's coming closer, it's like, whoo, So he ends up kind of walking the line of corn right there and going to the end of the woodlot. And I say, okay, I'm going to see that deer this morning before this is all over. Well, I kind of throw a couple blind grunts down that way just so he knows, where it was coming from still and all. And he's not in my line of sight, so I never want to grunt at a deer that can see me that I can't see him. You know what I mean? And I knew that he couldn't see me, so he would just maybe hear those grunts from that end of the timber and come down there. Well, I grunt in a little 6-point. He goes through and makes his way the other direction. So like, well, I guess he's going to see that guy here in a little bit. So it kind of goes calm for a little bit. I have to relieve myself, so I do that, and as soon as I'm zipping up, I'll look over, and there's this buck at 40 yards. He's not looking at me in the tree, but he's looking my direction. I think he heard the drippity drip coming down or hitting the ground. He's looking over there trying to see what that was, which isn't an unnatural sound, but either way, you just don't really want deer looking your direction, especially because of something you're doing. I don't really think it played a factor in anything that happened, but it just kind of made me go, put me on edge.
Well, I mean, if you like turn after that too fast, there's a good chance he could see you, you know, so it's kind of scary.
And not to like throw you under the bus or anything, but we've been hunting and you've turned too fast, like I think at least once in Iowa, right? And we got caught.
Where at?
Right? The big buck in Iowa.
Oh, he was
last
gone.
Night.
You talking about the last night?
Yeah.
You said you saw him running. I didn't turn till after.
Well, I thought that he saw you.
I was putting my jackets on.
Range finding or something. Yeah. Or in Texas, it happened to you, right? You're putting on jackets.
Yeah, in Texas it did happen to me.
Just the idea of movement spooking a deer is something that's been on my mind. So I've been, and I'm pretty bad about like thinking like, oh, there's not any deer around. I'm just going to just do this. You know, that's kind of why I peed at that moment. But anyways, so when I zipped up, I was kind of looking around before I did too much and saw him. Well, then he's still coming my direction, but he just kind of quarters to and goes into some thick stuff that I can't see. And I'm like, I don't know where he went. I grunted at him a couple times to try to get him to come this way, and he wasn't hearing it. That's something we ran into a bunch on this trip, was that deer just wouldn't respond to grunt calls. And I don't know if it's because what they were walking in was real loud, or if they just don't care.
I felt like they were, a lot of times those deer were locked down with a doe.
Yeah, it's like if there's a doe around at all, they don't care that that a buck is grunting.
Yeah.
But this one didn't have a doe anywhere. And he still didn't really care that much. And he proceeds to then show up 10 minutes later and eat my corn pile. Again, another shooter buck at the corn pile.
And you talked about with that deer, you're like, man, I should have just known better. I should have moved my stand this morning or whatever, you know. And it stinks to realize that, man.
Yeah, well, that was and I said that night when I got in the truck with you, the first thing I said the night before was like, I'm never, ever, ever setting up in a stand that's further from a corn pile than I can shoot. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. And then it was the last morning we're going to be there. But I only had till 9 o'clock to hunt because we had to get out. I had to be here to teach class last night. And so I was like, I'm just going to go sit that stand. It's a good spot. You know, the deer are going to run up and down that tree line chicken scrapes. And yet again, if I would have took the time and made the effort to go move a stand just for 2 hours worth of hang time, then it would have probably paid off. But a hang and hunt in the dark is not a fun thing to do, even on a place that you have been. And I wasn't for sure which tree I wanted to be in, and you never know what your shots are going to be like until it gets daylight. So who knows what would have happened in that scenario. But I do know that when I go back, I'm going to hang in a different spot than that tree. That's a great tree, man. Yeah. You can see a long ways, and up there, like seeing a long ways is a good thing because you can call a deer, or at least we have been able to in the past. This year, I don't think we really called any deer in, which was real strange. But I don't know, man. It just really stinks that within 12 hours to have two shooters at 50 yards and not be able to do anything about it. I know it, dude. I had that last morning was a good morning, and it's sad that we couldn't stay, but you got things to do. You got to get home, man. So, but that was a good day. I mean, I had 2 10 points fight. Got it on video, I believe. Haven't reviewed the footage or anything, but they fought over a doe like a couple hundred yards away. I was hunting public that morning, and then I'm literally doing my last interview where at like 9:10 because we got to get out, we got to get some things done, and we got to get home. And I was doing my final interview, and I was like, I'm trying to spin this a positive way and say, I learned a bunch and this and that. And I get like a minute into it, and I hear something behind the camera walking, and I look up, and there is a big, heavy 8, like 40 yards. I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Big buck, turn the camera around. At this point, my dadgum harness tether is like around my neck. My bow is completely behind me. My rangefinder is tucked into my bag. My grunt call's in my bag. I got to get all this stuff out. Like, he's not going to come within range of me. He's 40 yards going like perpendicular, maybe even away a little bit in this thick stuff. And so like I get everything. Of course, when I pull my bow, again, my arrow comes off the rest. When I try to pull my bow around from behind me, slides off the rest. Actually, no, it doesn't come off the rest. It comes off the string. It almost went off the rest. Did your knock fall out of the arrow, or did your knock come off the string?
Just came off the string, yeah. And
so you like your broadhead grabbed a stick or something? Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
That's not like an arrow fault. It's just something that happens. It's happened to me before. Just like you. It's not like your equipment was faulty. It's just a bad thing that happened.
Yeah,
Much, right?
yeah. It's just I mean, I don't. The first time my arrow came off the rest, I don't think it was necessarily a faulty equipment or anything, but just bad circumstance.
Yeah.
But yeah, this time, it just pulls it off. So I have to attach that back on. Then I have to turn back the other way. I have to, get my tether off of wrapped around my neck. I have to turn back the other way, grab my rangefinder, and then grab my, because I'm not going to shoot at a deer without ranging it at this point, because of what happened the night before, and grab my grunt call. At this point, he's like 50, kind of going away. I hit him with the grunt call. He looks, then he keeps going. Hit him with another grunt call, and he looks again, and then he kind of like does a little tail flicker, like he's kind of weird about it for some reason. He's not downwind of me yet. And then he works around through this little tree line and comes back around to try to get close to my wind, but he's still not on my wind. I don't think there's any ways on my wind. And then he just kind of sits there for a minute at like 60 yards and gets weird and takes off. So it was like, that was the last thing. I mean, I literally just started shoving stuff in my bag after that because that was what I was about to do anyway. But yeah, it was. It's just one of those deals where like I was trying to be positive, and then the rest of my interview goes like, you know what? Freaking everything is just like so close call, and then nothing never comes out to our way.
Yeah,
this
has been a fun podcast because it's all of that. It's like golly, you start talking about it, it's like. But I think we talked about this at camp. It's hunting is close calls until one of them goes right.
Yeah,
like it's always like you always have a sob story. Mm-hmm. It would be so cool and so public lands of me to be like, well, at least I got to be in the woods with that deer, right? And there is part of that, but I think like especially where we're at coming off that trip, it's kind of like, you kind of grit your teeth that you and I both had shooters within, like you had 2 shooters within 50 yards. I had 2 shooters within 50 yards in 12 hours. Mm-hmm. And we got 1 shot off between the 4 deer, and it didn't hit.
Nope.
It's like, gummit.
I honestly don't feel I don't feel that bad about it at all, really. Like I'm not even gritting my teeth really too much about it because I just know I know the odds of what I did, the game that I played with public and with being on the ground and everything. Like I know those odds for me were really long, so I just kind of have learned to deal with that a little bit. I guess you could say. Plus, being successful in Texas probably doesn't hurt. You know what I mean? As far as just keeping a good attitude, but it is definitely hard to go spend time and money and not get it done. But luckily, you and I have a chance to go back up there. I think at some point, and we're gonna make it happen at that point.
Yeah, so. I just wish that we could go on a trip like that, and it truly doesn't matter to me, but I just want one of us to kill something on the trip. Yeah, because it's like more enjoyable
together, and we get to take pictures of each other and stuff instead of having to like set it up on a tripod and put a
in the middle of the night.
Yeah, in the middle of the night and put a 10-second timer on, or whatever. Yeah, it's way more fun to shoot deer when other guys are in camp or whatever. So. Anyway, that's it's kind of the story of Kansas for us. Definitely excited to go back. We're going to try to make Iowa sometime around probably the time this podcast airs or whatever. And I think you might try to make Kansas sometime around the time this podcast airs. So just wish us luck. Keep looking at the story on Instagram. That's the best way to kind of see the day-to-day. And then we'll just continue to post pics if we're successful and everything else. And videos are going to be coming out on the regular, hopefully. Now I'm home for a few days, so I'm going to edit like a wild man and try to get Iowa wrapped up, Texas, and the first Kansas trip wrapped up. So hopefully that the next Iowa and Kansas trip can be pretty timely as well. So anyway, keep an eye on all that stuff. Casey, anything else we need to discuss? Am I forgetting anything?
I don't guess, man. Just y'all bear with us through hunting season because we try to get content out for you, and try to make sure we get good guests and whatnot. But everybody right now is just trying to hunt, and it's like it's kind of scramble season. So if you haven't killed something yet, don't worry. There's still a lot of time left in hunting season.
Dude, my favorite time of year is after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think if you think that I'm a decent hunter or have a decent thing to say about hunting, then you can take some confidence in knowing that I like things later in November and early December, man. So,
well, we had some definitely December weather this week. I hope that things get a little bit more moderate.
Yeah.
Like, I like going hunting in the cold, but 0 degrees with 30-mile-an-hour winds. Well, actually, that didn't happen. No, those are 2 different days. We had 0 degrees, but that was only like a 7 or 8 mile an hour wind.
We also had 20 degrees with a 30-mile-an-hour wind.
That was the worst day.
Yeah.
We actually spent some time in the truck that day.
A lot.
A lot of time in the truck that day.
Dude, I mean, what are you going to do in 30? It was a straight line 30. Like,
yeah.
A legit 30. We're not just saying, 30 when it was 20. It was legit a straight line 30. It was registered on Weather Underground. And if you saw our story, it was rippling through the grasslands.
And snow was going sideways.
Yeah.
Like straight up 90 degrees to the ground.
Like not landing.
Like it snowed for 20 minutes and there was no accumulation because the snow never landed.
Yeah.
It was just going
to Texas.
Yeah, that's nuts, man.
Yeah, anyway.
But it was fun either way. And if you haven't killed a deer yet, it's okay. If you don't kill a deer this season, it's okay because we like to do this. It's hunting. It's fun.
Yep. And you might have a friend that'll share some meat with you.
That's right. Maybe.
We've shared some meat over the years for sure, man.
Yeah.
It's been last year I was really sweating it, and you gave me some good public land spike meat.
I can't believe you still had some of that like a couple weeks ago. You were cherishing that.
It's been a couple months probably.
I thought you made spike stew for like Iowa or something like that.
Did I? Maybe I did. That was my last bag, I guess. Yeah. So it's good stuff.
It was.
Meat buck.
It's tasty. Meat buck. That's right, dude.
Dadgummit. I don't know why you call him a meat buck. He just made a lot of meat for us.
Well, call him an antler buck, but we didn't eat the antler. So I guess you just got to call him meat buck because we ate the meat.
Well, that's almost a sin. Anyway, well, thanks for listening. I hope you guys are getting out and getting in it. And God bless you guys. Remember, this is your element.
Living it.